pleasure to introduce a colleague who I've long admired. I've known him for a long time over the years. It's Dr. John Mackenzie, one of our emergency physicians, and he'll be talking about transforming incidents into practical and affordable clinical change. So I think it'll be interesting to hear his comments. He's got a broad background of experience and was initially a GP for 8 years before transitioning to emergency medicine. He's also deeply committed to supporting healthcare around the globe, and he's done a 2-year period of working with Médecins Sans Frontières and primarily in Africa. He's a senior staff specialist and he has a part-time appointment at the Prince of Wales Emergency Department. They're very lucky. Hyperbaric consultant and medical project officer with the Emergency Care Institute, which I'd recommend anyone Googling, if you don't know the Emergency Care Institute, to Google and have a look at its website. It's really fantastic and it's an innovation of New South Wales. He's past medical co-director of New South Wales Ambulance for 3 years, so has a fantastic understanding of pre-hospital care and dispatch, I'm sure. He's been involved in several major collaborative research projects in both of his roles, and he sits on several statewide groups across New South Wales, recently involving cardiac and palliative care. He's authored and published over 200 hours of interactive e-learning. I think that'd be a PhD, John, just there. I think we should give you one. He's got an obsessive cycling, and I thought I should just stress, I think that's push bike. That would be good, because I was wondering if it's a sleep disorder, John, or something. Cycling disorder, and have failed all attempts at rehabilitation. He's deeply passionate about that, and he challenges anyone if they'd like to go for a ride in Sydney, even though Cadell Evans actually refuses to. So if I could welcome to the stage Dr. John Mackenzie.
Thanks very much. I've always thought of myself as a bit of a blunt instrument, so it's quite nice to hear all those lies I made up for the start of the talk. So I want to talk a little bit about, or a lot about, what I do in my ECI role, which is, they asked what the name of my talk was when I arrived, and I couldn't remember, but transforming incidents into practical and affordable clinical change. It's a good name for the ministry because they like anything that's got affordable in it. We wouldn't like to be think of as being cheap. But we'll see where we go. So I'm a medical project officer there, and I've been involved predominantly to start off with the medical side. And this is a conflict of interest, because what I want you to do after this talk is stop going to conferences and just go to the website. It's all there. It's just, it's a waste of time. You don't need to travel. You can just Google it. But anyway, it's very good. So the ECI was established in 2011, for those of you who don't know and come from out of state, and it was with and for emergency departments. The mandate was to use incidents, surveys, research and data to drive change which is efficient and efficacious to get better patient care. And I think that we've moved a reasonable way down the path, but we've got a long way to go. I mean, not only that, is that we can produce icons that look like spaceships. We also can produce icons that look like flowers, and this is our sort of engagement circle that is coveted by ministry sort of places and that like to produce these things. But what it does is that it indicates that we touch a lot of areas of emergency medicine, pre-hospital care, and we have a lot of stakeholders. That's also a KPI for people that are paid for by the ministry, is to use stakeholder at least once in every talk, and I've done that now so I can relax. Now, we've got a wonderful group that works at the ECI. We have a new illustrious leader, Dr. Golding, who's only just joined us, so he hasn't really done anything yet. We've got Vanessa, who was there at the very start in 2011 and is our only founder member still there. Nick, who has arrived in the last few years and has done a wonderful amount of work. We're currently sourcing a new data manager. There's me. We've got Hatta McCory, who is a researcher extraordinaire and has immense patience and does an awful lot of work. And we also get two trainee registrars of the Australasian College of Emergency Medicine, and they provide all of the brains so that those of us that stand up and talk can take the glory. The thing that holds us together, and you would have seen in that diagram that looked like a spaceship, is our advisory committees, and we're very lucky in that we've got a group of three advisory committees: the clinical advisory committee with the co-chairs of Matt Bragg and Kylie Stark sitting over here, and then the research advisory committee, Kate Curtis and Ameth Shetty, and the incident advisory committee, Jackie Irvine, and the mysterious Anne Hawkins. I would defy anybody to go onto the internet and try and find a picture of Anne. It's like the Scarlet Pimpernel. But so all of the things in the working groups and the things that we produce are actually across these three groups, and we use the incidents and all of the information that we get to drive the things that we do. Now, affordable clinical change, it's a hard thing to quantify, so I'm just going to talk about what we do instead. Now, RCAs, long after RCA was a record company, they've become something that a lot of us are involved in. A number of us are terrified about, in case you get the tap on the shoulder and say, John, can you please come and have a chat to me about that patient you saw? But what it has done is given us a lot of data of incidents that have occurred over the years, and our Incident Advisory Committee have done an enormous amount of work, along with M&Ms, which were in fact a chocolate treat, which were provided for in the wartime so that the chocolate didn't melt. And I wasn't aware of that until I started looking for an image. And now 100% at war. Yee-hee. So I see that we might be needing these chocolate treats again sometime soon. So the ECI, Incident Advisory Committee, have been a wonderful group. They're very energetic. They've been engaged, and they've created a taxonomy, so a way of looking at RCAs. And they looked at all of the ones involving emergency departments from 2012 through to the start of 2016. And there's an enormous amount of information that's come out of that, and an enormous amount of knowledge that's held within this body of work, which I'm not going to talk about directly, but I'd just like to acknowledge what they have done over that period of time in terms of giving us data that we can use, and we have a reasonably clear idea of what's happening. Of course, the next stage is to try and make clinical practice better and safer. So some of the things that we've done is we've provided these red flag modules, which are a wonderful collection of things that do happen in EDs. Now, I love the flavour of the talk so far. I had busy elsewhere this morning, but from what I've heard is that simple is better. I find that there's a few components as I go through my emergency career of having to think about emergency as being simpler and simpler. A lot of it's the Alzheimer's, but other parts of it is I think it is actually, it should be a simple process what we do and have simple outcomes. The red flag modules are very good in explaining this. We've got a number of them and they're growing all the time. I'm just going to talk about a couple of cases just to give you an idea as what we do. Gut feeling. This is this one, 76-year-old male brought into local districts, abdominal pain. And everyone knows where this is going because it was an RCA. So there's only one place this guy can go, isn't it? He's going to pop and he's going to explode. And he's going to have, unchanged observations, and we're going to get things. They're going to be words like constipation. Constipation should be like in those sort of game show hosts. When somebody says the word constipation or even thinks it, then all of these sprinkles should fall out of the ceiling and go around them, and they should be swept out of the department, and the patient should be taken to the operating theatre. But yes, what actually did happen is this guy did have his rapid AAA and exploded all over the place. And so the red flags bring these things. I know that when the new interns start on Tuesday, and they're very excited, they come up and they said, look, I've just seen that 80-year-old and they had abdominal pain and they had constipation. I've given them a Coloxyl, I've sent them home. I sort of quiver and just call for the indemnity insurance person. But it gets worse because they train for a few years and they become surgical registrars who are absolute rock stars, and they start walking towards the patient, and they get within, when a surgical registrar is within 2 metres of an elderly patient and they tell them that they are not convinced or use any word similar to that, call the operating theatre. Get them straight up there. I'm not convinced, I think it's constipation too. So the next thing that we see a lot of and we can identify through the RCAs is headaches. Now, it's not the headache that's the red flag in this particular start. 26-year-old female medical student presented with headaches associated with dizziness, nausea. It's not the dizziness, it's not the nausea, but they get anxiety. When that 12-year-old intern comes up to me and says, I've got a patient out there and they're anxious. Well, I've got a history of anxiety and depression, anxious. Oh, and they've got such. Then I immediately poke them in the eye with both fingers and we go and see the patient. And this is the new learning method. So the thing at the top there is after the fourth presentation of getting told that she was anxious, unfortunately, it's a very sad case, she went on to die. So the red flag modules, well, I shouldn't have sort of said that so bluntly, should I? So I should have led you into that. It was a made-up case. So what we're doing is that we want these red flag modules to lead you in a very simple and rapid way to think about these things all the time. It doesn't matter at what level of training you are, but particularly new doctors, new nurses coming into an ED environment know what happens. If you're elderly, we should have a big message that reads, not outside the emergency department, but for the clinicians, poo doesn't hurt. If I haven't pooed for a few days, I don't have a sore tummy. Most people are walking out there with buckets of poo and they're not coming in to see me. And if I'm 80 years old at 12 o'clock at night, I'm not going to wake up and think, Christ, I've got to go and have a shit. I'm thinking, I've got a AAA. So what we've learned from our data is that we've got to take it seriously. And it was wonderful to hear that abdominal pain should be taken seriously everywhere. Now, the thing about emergency departments in New South Wales, it's a big place, and we have 184 plus, maybe growing, maybe getting less, emergency departments. So how do we get these messages across? And a couple of our wonderful fellows, trainees, started the idea of having a webinar so that we could bring mortality and morbidity meetings to rural places through the wonders of the net and telephones. So you can call in, you can get on, you can dial up. It was started by Gabby and carried on by Anne and now Joe, who are doing the eQuest, ED Quality Education Safety teleconferences. So it's kind of like an M&M meeting takeout. And initially we started off with to get people interested, because it's very hard just to start something and say we want you to talk about cases, and people have to learn the safe way of talking about these things, and we modulate that. So we've been putting out the cases like the headache, abdominal pain, testicular torsion, and all the favourites. And what's happened is it engenders discussion from problems that have happened in rural areas, and people start getting the benefit that we get from our wonderful crash protected environments in Sydney out in the rural areas, so that they feel a little bit more supported. And so we're hoping that this will grow. We're doing them monthly at the moment, and we're hoping it'll grow and get bigger and bigger. Now, what else do we do in our at the ECI? We've got the three, as we said, we've got the three committees, and they all have input into everything we do. We produce clinical tools that informs stuff. We inform clinical material for state groups, and we identify areas of research. This is the clinical tool list, which just scrolls endlessly down the page. There's hundreds and hundreds of them, so I would love you to go and have a look at them sometime. Headache, of course. Wonderful person would have been saved with that headache one. And we've got things like aged care we talk about, and there's also the abdominal pain in the elderly. We go out every year and we have chats to the rural small EDs, and we have workshops and different things, and we'll often record them and put them on the website if they're particularly interesting, riveting. Anything I don't do basically is recorded and put on there. So you can actually access a lot of material there. Procedures is actually developing and growing. I told you it would be a little bit like an advertorial, but you'll be able to. And also the patient fact sheets. Now, the patient fact sheets, I think, are really a very important way to change behaviour in EDs. What I'd like is patients to actually get them almost with triage. And the way that we've specifically written them is it prompts in there to ask your doctor if. So patients are pretty smart, and in our place, of course, they don't get any time to wait at all, and they get whisked away. But on the off chance that the patient is going to be waiting for a little period of time, and they read it through and they say that, I don't necessarily need to get this test, or I don't need to get a skull x-ray, if I've got a sore head, or I can do this and do this, then they might actually prompt the rock star locum who's come to kill your patients to actually do something. And they can say, well, I didn't actually get that, and I didn't get the ultrasound, I didn't do that, why am I going home? So I think that the fact sheets serve two purposes. It engages the patient, it gives them something to do while they wait for that 5 or so minutes to be seen. And also it might prompt them to engage with the clinician who's actually looking after them. Our fact sheets have been translated into 8 languages, which we found in New South Wales, which were the top presentations to our EDs. Now, the other thing, this is kind of like a mea culpa, this statewide acute coronary syndrome protocol, which I've been working on for 300 years, and it's still not out. But one of the things that was apparent when we're involved in these protocols and guidelines is that if we all sit in a room as a committee, we can come up with all sorts of things. I don't know, you've all read guidelines where it looks like a group of people have got into a room, they're all academics, they've taken a lot of acid, and then they've written a pathway. Now, I don't know what that's like, but I know what those pathways look like when I think that they've done that. So what we've decided that we would do is that we would get our pathway at certain stages, or I decided that we would do, and actually can map it against the RCAs and see if we could possibly have stopped that if they were on that pathway. And I think that we need that sort of real-world approach to some of the things that we're doing, and when we try and adapt, this is why our clinical advisory and incident advisory groups and research advisory groups, the information that we get from that drives a lot of the stuff that we do. This is the, we can't have any of our talks without mentioning the Australia-New Zealand Airway Registry, which is where research changes what we do. Across the board, and this has been going for a few years now, and it was the love child of Toby Fogg, and now it's the love stepchild of Hatta Makuri from the ECI, our research guy. And it's involving lots and lots of people across a number of different EDs, and we're getting a lot of information as to our practice about intubation. What it is doing, no matter when you've started through, whether it was a year ago or 3 years ago, is that by looking at what we do, it makes what we do better. And we all know that. If we put the microscope under our practice, and then we're more conscious of it, and we standardise what we do. We don't want everybody doing the same thing, but we'd like everybody starting from the same level of expertise and then moving out. I put this blank slide in because I always forget where I'm going at this stage. And this encourages me to think that so we've talked about the ECI and what we do, and now to sort of put it all into context, I think that our context is pretty hard. Is that we've got a ever-increasing number of people coming in to see us, and they're sick. They're getting more and more complex, and we listen to more and more complaints, not from the patients, that's understandable because we killed quite a few, but from our colleagues. Well, maybe they died. I don't know. I don't think we killed them, but I don't know what you do in your departments. So you picture this. We had a big, tough winter and we had lots of flu, and we're going up to the ward that takes our ID patients, and you're taking that 26th person with flu up there, and they're looking at you. And it's like, as if you're personally responsible. It's like we've got the triage nurse is sitting in the triage room threading the RNA together to make that next flu virus, and then going and sneezing on those 26 patients, and then I'm taking them up to you to piss you off. So we've got a tough environment. And somehow you're going to have to drop off this person who's got their flu and then go back and deal with your 6 new patients that have just racked off that you didn't splice the RNA. We know you didn't do that. So what we've got to do is that we have to look clearly about what we teach and what we think about, and this is why I think it's important to keep it simple. And the point of all of this is perhaps where I want to go now. Oh, well, look, let's go this. If this is something I put in, I forgot I put this in. See, that blank slide was useful. If you go to just to feel good about yourselves and think about it in this way, if I go up to the neurology ward, they think about one thing. If I go to the respiratory ward, they think about 2 things. Actually, the urology ward thinks about 2 things as well. If I go to ENT, they think about 3 things. You know where this is going. Orthopaedics, they think about 4 things. Endocrine's really smart. They've got about 5 or 6 things, but nobody knows. What they see and what they think about you when you take Granny up is that, oh, here's the ED doctor. Patient's stable. They don't know that you've actually resuscitated them, given them 5,000 drugs, 2,000 interventions, made them all nice, packaged them and brought them up. Because in actual fact, what you're doing is that you're thinking about all of these things, And then you're having to deal with it for this little person, that person, that person, that person, that person, that person, and then this comes while I'm thinking about those, and then this, and then this, and then the police bring in this guy with 8... I'm just about to give Granny her soft food because she's got swallowing issues, and this guy comes in and we've got to get out the bucket of droperidol. So it's a very, very complex environment. So I think that we can feel pretty good about it. So when we're going up there and you're getting shit when you're handing over the patient because you didn't get paracetamol. Where's the paracetamol? It's not written up. We can't take them. So I think you can think and just smile calmly and think, you don't do what I do. Now, what we do for our baby docs when they come through at SRMOs, and we've started it the last couple of years, and I think it's a good model. You'll know that registrars are, I, like everybody, we just ignore the interns and the RMOs, but when they're registrars, they're almost worth listening to. And they impact very heavily on emergency nurses, because when the interested or disinterested consultant leaves before these guys are running the place. So what we've tried to do is cognitively, using our incident data, we've decided that there's top 10 things. There's actually about 20, but we start off with 10. And these are the things that you should know, and we template for them, and we have a couple of days, of course we've got some of our people from the hospital I work at, and our NUMs and here as well. I'm not sure if our registrars coming through seem more comfortable, but cognitively, by templating these 10 things that you have to do, they only have to worry about all the other things because they already know. And that's what I think emergency can be simple. You know, airway's always going to make them nervous, and we can simulate all the time and get better. That STEMI, headache, abdo pain, sepsis, they're all very simple. They should be simple for us. So then when it gets complicated and you've got to argue, and is it respiratory, is it cardiac, you can use the cognitive load for that, but it should be paint by numbers for the other ones in an intelligent and worthwhile way. So that's it from me. I think that all I can do now is advertise further and say that this is a wonderful conference, and there is another wonderful one, which is affordable, so affordable it's free. All you have to do is register for our annual symposium, which is coming up in November. So I hope to see you all there. Thanks very much.